witness is named George Meister.
Mr. Meister.
How do you do, sir? Are you Mr. Meister? Will you be sworn in, please, by Mr. Goodell? Mr. Meister, I must ask you the same five standard questions I ask every witness. Are you appearing today and to testify under oath voluntarily? Have you been paid by anyone for your testimony other than the expenses to come to Clearwater?
No, sir.
Do you have a lawsuit against the Church of Scientology?
No, sir.
And does the Church of Scientology have a lawsuit against you?
No, sir.
Has anyone suggested to you that you should state anything but the truth, or has anyone suggested that you change your testimony for any reason?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Well, my name is George Meister, and I'm here not because I've ever been a member of the Church of Scientology or ever will, but I'm here in behalf of my daughter, Susan. And I'd like to have the camera get a shot of this picture, if possible. This is a picture of my daughter. That's all I have.
Can you get it, Susan?
Susan died aboard the ship's Apollo, June 25th, 1971, with a bullet in the middle of her forehead.
She's a beautiful woman.
So, I first received news of this death when we live in Greeley, Colorado, and my business took me over a four-state area. I was in Salt Lake City at the time. And I received a telephone call from my daughter, youngest daughter. I have two daughters. My young daughter, Robin, called me and said, Dad, Susan's dead. I said, what? She said, yeah, Susan's dead. She said, Reverend Marin is here, and he's going to wait till you get home to acquaint you with the facts of her death. I says, who is the Reverend Marin? She says, he's a minister from the Church of Scientology. So, I don't know, everything became a blur. You don't think very straight in cases of that kind. I mean, the shock was extreme. I have a cousin in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, who was a practicing attorney there. And I called him and I said, I need help. I'm going to fly into Denver, and when I get into Denver, I'd like to have you meet me there, because we have this man from the Church of Scientology there who was going to tell us about Susan's death. And he said, Susan's what? I said, yeah, my daughter's dead. So he said, I'll be there. And he was. So we went to Greeley and discussed the thing with my wife and my daughter, Robin. Then proceeded to meet with Reverend Marin. They informed us that Susan had died aboard the yacht's Apollo by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He said, we have a report here that's been that the ship put out, and it was it was worded that that Susan had committed suicide.
You looking for the letter from the other?
Yeah. No, I'm looking for that report they put out. But we talked with the Reverend Mayor quite some time, and of course my cousin, being an attorney, had some inquiring questions, like were there any witnesses to this? And he couldn't come up with any witnesses, anyone who had seen this happen. What were the circumstances? Well, Susan died aboard the ship in the harbor of Safi in Morocco, North Africa. So the fact sheet that they put out that he gave me said Miss Susan Meister was found dead from a gunshot wound in her forehead approximately 7:35 p.m. on Friday, June 25th, 1971. The door was locked and admittance to the cabin was only gained after a key had been obtained from the berthing steward. She was lying fully clothed on a bunk in the cabin. There was no pulse. The police authorities were immediately notified and the body was taken ashore to the police mortuary for an autopsy as required in such circumstances. On the floor of the cabin, the police found a suicide note which they took as evidence. The captain had all persons restricted to the vessel except for senior officers assisting the police in their investigation until such time as the autopsy was completed and the police investigation completed. The gun used was a .22 caliber target revolver belonging to another person on board. Susan knew that he had such a gun as she had watched him clean, reassemble, and replace it in a drawer in his cabin. The gun was found clasped in her hand. On the day of her death, Susan was seen aboard by many people, particularly up till 2:30 p.m. She appeared to be quite happy and not in the least distressed or disturbed. As her job entailed the delivery of communications to all parts of the vessel, this explained why so many saw her in the time period mentioned. However, in the afternoon, she was found missing at her work as clerical assistant, and as a crew member looked for her and found her alone in the cabin, where she later committed suicide. This was 3 p.m., and he asked her to come back to work, which she did, as she was seen by her senior at 4 p.m. However, she didn't make her usual communication deliveries at 5 p.m., nor did she appear for dinner at 6 p.m. Susan arrived on board February the 19th, 1971, and although the police took the suicide note as evidence, one of the ship's officers was asked to read it to them. He stated that in the note, Susan mentioned that she wanted her possessions to be sent to her parents, especially her books, and she was sorry for any mess caused anyone. Well, basically, this is what happened. And as soon as possible, taking the time that it took to get passports and so forth, I made up my mind that I was going to Morocco to find out what happened. Morocco wasn't a new place to me. I landed there in 1942 with the U.S. Army. I was in the combat engineers, and I knew what a hole that country was. But it was about 2 weeks later, maybe a little longer, that I was able to leave. And I stopped off in Washington, D.C., because I had a feeling that going over there to that country, and with what little I could learn about these people, that I wanted all the protection that I could get. I stopped at the office of Gordon Allett, who was the United States Senator from Colorado in Washington, D.C., and Gordon Allett was extremely helpful. Peter Dominic was also another one of our U.S. senators, and he was helpful. So between the two of them, they provided me with letters, and they provided me with the information that I'd need and who to see when I got to Morocco. After I left the States, went to Morocco, landing in Casablanca. It was real foggy there, I remember that. And coming in on the Pan Am's, one of those old Boeing 707s, We had to make 3 passes at the airport before we could finally find a hole through the fog and get down and find the field. Well, this was 3 o'clock in the morning. So as I went over to the terminal with the rest of the passengers, I was looking around for the vice consul that I was told was going to meet me. Instead of that, my name came over the loudspeaker in the airport. I went up to this desk, and here was a man and a woman standing there to meet me. The man's name was Peter Warren, and he introduced himself, and he introduced the woman as Joni from the ship Apollo. They were from the Church of Scientology. And they were to escort me. And I said, well, where is the vice consul? Where's this government official that I wanted to meet me? He said, well, he had a previous engagement, and he asked if we'd look after you. Okay. So it was some 20 miles into Casablanca. We went into the Mar Harbor Hotel, and I was given a room in this hotel. And it was an all-night flight from New York to Casablanca. And I was tired, so I went to sleep. And about 10 o'clock the next morning, I got a call from the vice consul. And he came over to the hotel room, and then we started going over the facts of Susan's death, that it was by gunshot wound and so forth. And he became alarmed.
The man had some previous intelligence experience, and he said, I don't like this at all. And we were to go to Safi, which was about 100 miles south of the coast.
So these people, the Scientologists, Warren and this Joni, were always there. I could never move without them being right by my side. So the following day, the 4 of us took a car and drove to Safi. And I had a camera with me. I had some 35 rolls of film. And I thought, well, what I'd do, I'd like to photograph everything and get as much as I could on film. So we went drove down to Safi. And when we got there, Jack Galbraith was the vice consul's name, and he suggested we go to the local police department and see what we could find out about it. We went to the police department, and the man who was in charge of the police was very helpful. First thing he done was show me a photograph of Susan is lying on the bunk with this hole in her head and blood running out the corners of her mouth. It wasn't a very pleasant sight. Then all the reports that they showed on this death were all written in French. And of course, I couldn't read French, and neither did Jack Galbraith. So that wasn't too effective. So I asked. Then they showed us the box. I wanted to see the gun that she supposedly shot herself with, and they showed us a box. Just the box the gun came in, which didn't tell me much of anything. But then this picture where Susan laid in death, they said, this is the way we found her. Her body was undisturbed by anybody until the French police came or the Moroccan police and took charge. She was lying there with the bullet hole in her head. Her arms were crossed on her chest, and in the middle of her breast on her arms, underneath her arms, was this .22 caliber long-barreled revolver. How can anybody shoot themselves in the head and then put the gun on their breast, being between 2 clasped hands? How do you do that? How do you shoot yourself in the middle of the head with a long-barreled revolver holding it out like this? I think you'd have to use 2 hands, and then you might miss. But the other thing is, in all the suicides that I know anything about, I find it very rare that a woman commits suicide by gunshot. Could be pills or something of that nature, but hardly ever gunshot. But then we went next to the so-called hospital where this autopsy was performed, and of course we ran into the same situation over there. I asked the police before I left for these reports. They said, no, can't have any. Well, what about the picture? No, can't have it. How about a copy of the picture? No, can't have it. So after going over to this morgue, well, it was a hospital and extremely dirty. And of course, I don't know if, you know, most people feel like things in foreign countries are going to be the same as they are in this country. They're not. A place like Morocco it's a monarchy, and of course the king of Morocco, as it is today, he runs that country totally. And whatever he says is the law. It carries all the way down from the top to the very lowest citizen. If he wants somebody dead, they're dead. It's that simple. And of course, anyone who's a citizen of this country, when you get into a problem in any of those foreign countries, even though they are like Morocco, you're subject to the laws of that country. Because of the fact you're a United States citizen doesn't have anything to do with it. But in the next place we went to was the hospital, and the doctor in charge was wearing something that looked like a long white gown, and it was dirty and blood-stained. Looked like he'd worn it for maybe a week. And he had patients there, and they showed us into this operating room. And honestly, I've seen butcher shops that look better. This was where the autopsy was done. I had a man with me from the Church of Scientology, this is Peter Warren. And he said, we ordered the autopsy. He said, we had her brain removed. We had all her intestines removed. I said, why? He said, we were looking for drugs. We suspected her of using drugs. So I said, fine, where's her body? I was told before I came over by you people that her body would be in a refrigerated morgue and that I would be able to identify her. That's why I went there. I went there to identify my daughter's body because I didn't believe she was dead. I wanted to see her body. Well, he says it isn't here right now, this doctor at the hospital. He says, I don't know where it is. So we went to another place, this records house, and didn't find out anything there. We finally wound up in the office of the Pasha, and the Pasha is the same as the mayor in this instance. Well, the Pasha was a very small, well-dressed individual with a little mustache, a very arrogant little guy. He took in the whole case. I'm not no reflections, Your Honor.
I'm just
They're known to be that way.
Tall, so.
Oh, you got to...
But anyway, he wound up telling us that in view of everything that had happened, he said, all these records are going to be transferred to Marrakesh, which was the provincial capital, some 150 miles away. I said, if you want to pursue this matter any farther, you'll have to engage a Moroccan attorney. You'll have to wait for a court date. And you'll have to be here. How long is that going to take? Well, he said, could be a month, could be 6 months. Well, I knew there was nothing. You know, there wasn't anything further to do, and then it was getting pretty well along in the day, so we decided, well, we better stay in Safi that night because going back to Casablanca was about 100 miles, and the roads over there are full of wandering people. They have no homes. They just wander. And wherever they happen to be, that's where they stay. You know, the country's warm. Usually the weather's warm over there. So we decided, well, better not to hit one of them guys or get in any kind of trouble. You're driving up the road, and if you happen to run into one of those Moroccan, wanderers, I suppose if the Pasha ran over one of them, there's nothing to be said, be okay. But if I ran over one of them, I think I'd be in jail forever. So we decided against that. There's a hotel in Safi called the Metropole Hotel, so we decided we'd stay there that night. We went over, and you don't do anything in Morocco without a passport. You have to have a passport to register in a motel, to get a train, to do anything you want to do. So we went over and registered in the hotel using our passports. And Jack Galbus said, well, I told my wife in Casablanca, he said, that I was going to be back tonight. And he said, in this country, you make sure you tell people where you're at. So he couldn't get through his wife. They don't have much of a telephone system there. It runs and then it doesn't run. So he tried to call his wife. And he couldn't get through to her. So he finally called the office of the consul, and he got through there, and he asked if they wouldn't mind telling his wife that he was going to stay over and where he was. So she got the message right away, and it was about an hour later, I guess must have been about 10 o'clock that night, in this hotel. She called down there to the hotel. She wanted to talk to him, find out where he was and how long he was going to be gone. And the desk clerk that answered the call said, we never even heard of that man. We never heard of George Meister. We were registered there. We later found out that Lafayette Ronald Hubbard had the top floor of the hotel. This was a practice that he was quite, that was usual with him in all these places where this ship Apollo was a rather small ship. I remember the thing I saw when I was overseas. It used to be a troop transport, and when I was over in North Africa in the early 40s during World War II, they were using that thing for a troop transport, and it was what we consider a small ship. But what Hubbard would do, he'd be on board that ship when it was underway, and then when they'd get in these towns, he'd take over maybe the top floor of the hotel, and he'd stay there with all of his messengers and all his girls that like the ashtray and so forth that Mrs. Hartwell described to you, and that really did happen. So, and the people on board the ship it was a very confining thing, very, very confining. Okay. Yeah, well, I think, I'd better start in, how did Susan get into Scientology? Okay, this happened when she was, Susan was 22 years old, and she'd gone to school for quite some time, and she decided she was going to San Francisco from Colorado. So she said she wanted to go out there and work. Fine. So she and there was about 4 of them that went out there. She got a job. She had a couple of jobs, as a matter of fact, and one job that she had was with Grolier Publishing Company, selling magazine subscriptions by telephone. And that's where she met a couple of people, and they were very interesting, and they were, learning to sell by telephone, and these people were Scientologists. They were apparently learning Grolier Publishing Company's techniques on how to sell by telephone. But she went over to this Scientology org, I suppose what it was, on Mason Street in San Francisco, and she was very impressed at her reception. The reception room was very neat, and the girl that was on the desk was very orderly, and she was treated very well, and Scientology was really presented to her first class. And she was impressed. She really was impressed with this. So she just kept going back, and then she she got this free personality test. She liked that. Then we got a letter from him and stating that she was in the Scientology, and that she thought it was something that was real good, and she was interested in it. So this was in the fall of 1970, and then she wanted to go to Los Angeles. She said, in order to pursue this further, in order to become more advanced in this thing, it's necessary that I go to Los Angeles. She came home for Christmas in 1970, and then she went back to San Francisco, and let's see, I think she left there in the latter part of January. She went to San Francisco, and that was the last time we ever saw her alive. But she went to San Francisco or to Los Angeles. Then we found out later that she went from Los Angeles. She didn't stay there very long, but she went from there to New York, to Lisbon, Portugal, and from Portugal she went to Casablanca, and that's where she caught the ship.
I'd like to put a couple letters on the overhead projector, and for the record, the ship was in the Flagland base. And the Flagland base of the Church of Scientology now is Clearwater, Florida.
It was flag base, not flag land.
So then we would have to assume then that the same ship is running this ship here.
With regard to the organizational policies that concern this commission and concern the Church of Scientology, which is one of the reasons for this testimony, is we will, after we create a factual record from a legal perspective, that will be arrived at. The policies that run the Church of Scientology, as I believe the evidence will eventually show, as it is beginning to show, are uniform throughout the world, and those policies are followed everywhere.
Counsel, I hate to ask this, but does Mr. Meister know about a specific policy, R245?
I believe he is aware of R245. The next exhibit is a letter dated 8/5/71 from Flag, and it's addressed to Susan's mother in Greeley, Colorado, and it reads, "Do you recall talking to me about World War II, World War III, and where it would start if it were to start? Father and most everyone else maintained that it would start in either China or Russia versus U.S. And you said, oh no, it would originate in Germany, that the Nazis hadn't given up yet. Well, babe, you were right. There is a new Nazi resurgence taking place in Germany. So now it's a race between the good guys and the white hats, Scientologists, in the Leipzig death camps, parenthesis Nazis, the bad guys and the black hats. We'll win, of course, but the game is exciting. Truth is stranger than fiction. As Alice in Wonderland says, things get curiouser and curiouser. Get into Scientology now. It's fantastic. Love, Susan."
Counsel, can her father identify that as being her writing, or?
Definitely.
That is her...
There's no doubt about it.
Is that Exhibit 41?
I might add one thing, because Susan's penmanship, usually, she wrote that was her style of writing, but usually her lettering was spaced very well. You'll notice the letter here, the writing is big, it's small, it runs together, and this is an indication to me that something just wasn't right with her.
And the next exhibit is a letter dated 12/8/71 from Flag. And it's addressed to Dear Family in Greeley, Colorado. And you would note, I believe the last letter was dated in August, some 4 or 5 months before that. And it says, "Dear family, I just had a session, an auditing session. I feel great, 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 and my life is expanding, expanding, and it's all Scientology. Hurry up, hurry, hurry. Be a friend to yourself. Get into this stuff now. It's more precious than gold. It's the best thing that's ever, 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 ever come along. Love, Susan."
She was found dead when?
May
June 25th, 71.
June 25th.
That one of the letters I saw had a 12/5/71 date on it. Could that be instead 5/12/71, June 12th, 1971, a few days before
What she was doing then was going into a military type dating. Her first letters, you know, before she got into this, onto this ship and so forth, things suddenly started to take on a military character, like it'd be 15 June 71.
So, in other words, that letter that you saw on the screen was 2 weeks before her reported death date.
This last one?
Yes.
No, this last one here was dated, that's April. No, let's see, this, the one in which she's really not coherent, in my judgment here, was dated, that was May the 12th, 1971. She had said 12/5/71, which actually would be May the 12th.
I think I made 12/8.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. But everything starts to take on the military character.
Right.
So then she comes...
3 days later.
Okay, then what happens when the Reverend Mirren came to our home in Greeley and left so many unanswered questions, the only thing that he left with us was his address in Los Angeles at the headquarters of the Church of Scientology. And in that, shortly after that, I received a letter signed by a Reverend Thomas from the Church of Scientology. And they were, he says here, "First may I express my sincere condolences for your bereavement in what must be a shocking and tragic loss. I had expressed to Arthur Marin my desire that my daughter's body would be returned to the United States. Under no condition would I allow my daughter to be buried on foreign soil, and especially in Morocco." So this being a real demand of mine, then I get this letter when he gets back. This dated 7th of July, 1971. "May I first express my deep and sincere condolences for your bereavement in what must be a shocking and tragic loss. For myself as well as the church, may I express the hope that the spirit of your daughter may yet find tranquility that it has so restlessly sought." The purpose of Reverend Marin's visit was an expression of the solicitude that any church might feel upon the loss of a parishioner. Reverend Marin acted as an emissary for the church, and at the request of Captain Starkey, was entrusted with easing the distress to you and your family on what might otherwise been a belated and perhaps abruptly impersonal notification by officialdom. As you requested to Reverend Marin for additional information, I fully understand your concern. Official details relative to the tragedy, I am sure, will be contained in the duly recorded testimonies supplied in the inquest, as well as the coroner's report and the death certificate, which I am informed is presently en route to you. These documents will undoubtedly contain the detailed information which you, as a relative of the deceased, should expect to receive regarding the circumstances of the death. I'm sure that you understand that the ship's company an independent Panamanian agency, is under no obligation to the Church of Scientology of California to provide information that it might deem goes beyond the scope of a reasonable inquiry by bereaved parents. In addition to the details Reverend Marin has already communicated to you, a precis of which is attached, further details as to the church activity and doctrine can be found in the literature book, in the Book of Ceremonies, which is included. They sent me a copy of the Book of Ceremonies. As to the shipment of the remains, the ship's captain has indicated that should you wish a local Christian burial with monument, such will be arranged in a Christian cemetery in Morocco at company expense. Now, if the remains are to be shipped to the United States, which I understand is your desire, the company regrettably is not in a position to bear the considerable costs involved. And please call me further should you have any need for the services of good office of the church. And this is signed by Reverend Robert Thomas.
Did you ever get the body back?
Yeah.
Yes, I did, Your Honor, and how I did was going to Morocco, and after this battle over there, then is when the real war started. It was a tug-of-war between me and the Church of Scientology. Then several little harassing things started to happen, like letters coming,
Was a regular autopsy ever performed on your daughter that you could trust?
No, sir, it wasn't. The
You
reason
just removed
being
her
what
brain in Morocco and her organs, and that's the autopsy?
Yeah, that was the autopsy, yes, but there was never like
An
a
official
report
one,
or
coroner's.
signed by a doctor or anything, or a pathologist or anything like that. Nothing. Not
Is
a
that
thing.
standard procedure in Morocco?
There is no procedure in Morocco.
Okay.
And the death certificate, this is it, which is actually a worthless document. It shows no sign, no cause of death. And what you have to do is just go on their word. And really what happened, the only thing that we could go by, any explanation came in the letters from the Church of Scientology. We never did receive anything from the Moroccan government. I was told again that if I intend to pursue it, I'd have to engage a Moroccan attorney and go to Marrakesh to get the facts, which nothing would happen. But anyway, what happened, this tug-of-war between me and the Church of Scientology and the Moroccan government and getting Susan's body back to Greeley, Colorado for the Christian burial that I thought it deserved. And then I didn't have any idea of what happened to her body, but I later learned that she had been buried in a Moroccan cemetery in Casablanca in a burlap sack. I became so insistent on this that they finally dug up her body, and a local mortician in Casablanca, what they have to do, there's a procedure they have to do in shipping bodies out of Morocco and into the United States, and I think those procedures are more demanded by the United States government. They have to place the body in an airtight container. In this case, it was a tin container and it was soldered shut, and then they put it in a wooden coffin after that. And in that condition, it was transported to the United States. Okay, 10 days prior to this, and we knew that Susan's body was coming. Here comes a letter to the Weld County Health Department, Greeley, Colorado. Sirs, recently this reporter has disclosed to him some rather alarming news. I once had to cover a story in a small town such as Greeley, which had rather primitive but nevertheless adequate health facilities. They choose to ignore a cholera warning from the World Health Organization, and believe me, the results are not pleasant. There has been a cholera epidemic in Morocco, and everyone leaving the country is required to have a cholera shot before leaving, and there's a public health campaign to get all citizens vaccinated. However, there is a shortage of vaccine. There have been a reported 200 to 300 deaths, and it's been brought to my attention that the daughter of one George Meister died in Morocco either by accident or from cholera, probably the latter. Meister either already has or is in the process of bringing back the body to Greeley. And an epidemiologist, I don't know how to pronounce the word.
Epidemiologist.
Okay, an epidemiologist that I have talked to concerning this said that this was pure insanity and that he knew of one exact such case that caused an outbreak of cholera. And I urge you to handle this health threat to all Greeley citizens. Everybody could be affected by this, and we cannot be complacent with such a danger. My informant believes the funeral home where the body is shipped is called Macy's in Greeley. Please act quickly, as lives could very well hang in the balance. I'm sending copies of this letter to most health officials in the entire state of Colorado. My attorney has advised me not to reveal my name due to possible legal hazards, but if necessary, I will do so to the press, for my children live here, and I have seen a cholera epidemic. Very sincerely, a citizen.
Who was that letter sent to?
Beg your pardon?
Who was that letter sent to?
Well, the county health department.
The county health department. Was it also sent to the press?
No, it wasn't.
Local
the woman who is in the county health department knew of Susan's death, and actually Susan had worked, this is in conjunction with Weld County General Hospital. And she had known Susan before Susan got involved in Scientology. And she knew of the fact that Susan's body was coming to Greeley, and she called me and said, here's a letter, she said, that makes me sick.
Mr. Meister, what was the date on that letter?
This letter is dated August the 19th, 1971.
Where did it originate from?
Nobody knows. I've received all kinds of anonymous letters like this.
I mean, postmark on the
It was postmarked Greeley. It was mailed in Greeley.
Okay. That is going to be marked as an exhibit. There is a policy of the church called third partying, which will be brought up at a later time. And I believe that's all. The letter from Mr. Thomas, dated 7 July 1971, will be the next exhibit, and that letter, dated August 19th, 1971, will be the exhibit after that. And I believe that's all the direct testimony of Mr. Meister.
There's just one thing I wanted to add to that. This has been very hard for me to do what it is. It's 10 years ago I couldn't have done this. I couldn't work. I couldn't function for a year. But it's I'm hopeful that this is going to help somebody. But what I wanted to say is, when we did go to Morocco, and Jack Galbraith and I were there, and we went on board the ship, I took 30 rolls of film, and coming back in the car, we got back to Casablanca, and my camera was there, the film was gone, the film was stolen. When I went aboard the ship, I went over there with the express idea of seeing Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. I knew nothing about the Church of Scientology. I knew nothing about what their doctrine was. I didn't know anything about how they operated, but I did know that my daughter was dead, and I wanted to talk to Lafayette Ronald Hubbard as one father to another, because he had a daughter, Diana, who is approximately the same age as my daughter. And I felt that under any circumstance like that, one father would be glad to talk to the other. He refused to see me.
He refused to see you? Did he know you were?
Yes, he was on the ship. We were allowed to go onto the fantail of the ship and look around. They said, this is where Susan slept. And then they said, this is where she died. And there was a little cabin there, it was near the pilot house. And it appeared like this would be a place where somebody who was off watch, might catch a few winks prior to going on watch again or something. But this was the cabin where they supposedly found her body. Now, the way Susan is dressed here, this is exactly the dress she had on when she was laying there in death. And this dress was the dress her mother made for her before she left. And in effect, in my judgment, this is a Class A uniform. In the United States Army, when a general court-martial convenes, you must wear a Class A uniform along with all your ribbons. And the sentence of the court-martial is carried out, and they either shoot you or hang you or take the ribbons off.
I found her, in my judgment, in a Class A uniform. You may draw your own conclusions. I know what I think.
I better say for the record that, well, first of all, I want to thank you for telling this very, very tragic story. Of course, it is not the function of this commission to determine the facts of your daughter's death. However, we accept this evidence as helpful in shedding some light on the history of the flag organization. The stories keep getting more bizarre and more bizarre as each witness comes before us. I really don't have any questions for you either, sir, at this point. I frankly don't know what to ask. I just know that they certainly don't seem to... I don't know of any organization, I don't know how they could act that way. Acting, frankly, from what you tell me, they're acting more like animals than human beings. And the way they disregard your daughter's body is just tragic. I have no questions. Mr. Burfield?
I asked the Harwells what they could tell Clearwater because they were some older people, and I was thinking about the older people. But Mr. Meister, I have a daughter too. I don't think you have to tell me what we in Clearwater have to do.
Well, you know, in the case of everyone who's been here at this microphone, who's spoken, they've been in some way connected with the Church or Scientology. I haven't. I never will, and I hope to God that no one else will.
Mrs. Garvey, I'm sorry, are you through, Mr. Burfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey, do you have any questions?
Mr. Meister, on your outline on page 3, there's some comment in here about flying out of Morocco, where the Scientologist urgently contacted Meister and tried to settle by offering cash. Number I, at the airport, he was approached by a large man who told Mr. Meister, "We are watching you." K, in the letter dated November 11th, from Assistant Secretary of State, the Apollo's port captain threatened in the presence of the American Vice Consul from Casablanca, William Galbraith, that he had enough material, including illicit photographs of Miss Meister, to smear Meister. Would you want to comment on that section of that?
Sure. What happened was on this, let's see, on the first part of this, my flight was scheduled to go back to New York from Casablanca on Sunday. Pan Am was only running one flight a week. And everything that we could do, I arrived there on Sunday, and everything that we could do had been done. I mean, in my judgment, from the experience we had in Safi, it was such total frustration. I was getting nowhere. Mm-hmm. And the longer I stayed in Morocco, the less comfortable I was. I was very uneasy. And I was, well, having been in Morocco before and knowing what went on, a human life doesn't mean anything in that part of the world. And I really didn't expect to come back when I went over there. So I was going down the elevator on this the Mar Harbor Hotel, and I happened to see a man there that looked American, and I spoke to him and asked him if he was from the States, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm the manager of Pan Am." I said, "Good. Is there a flight?" This was Wednesday. I said, "Have you got a flight out of here?" He says, "No, we don't have anything until Sunday. It's going to New York." And I says, "No, but is any other airline going?" He said, "Yeah, Lufthansa's got a flight tomorrow morning that goes to Frankfurt, Germany." I said, "Can you get me on it?" He said, "Sure." So I said, "That's fine." So after he went over to his office, and I went by a roundabout way and got over there because I was followed and watched all the time that I was there. Went over and had my ticket reworked for Frankfurt. And the following morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, I was paying my bill, but the Scientologists told me they would take care of all my expenses. They met me there. They never took care of anything. My hotel bill was like $700 for 4 days. And I was told by the hotel that you have to pay. Well, I knew that they meant exactly what they said, or I'd have wound up in some Moroccan jail. So luckily they took an American Express card, and I paid the bill. But as I was getting ready to leave, Peter Warren, who was usually late at any kind of a function we had, here he came. And this man was very upset. He said, I have to talk to you. I said, okay, what do you want? I said, give you 5 minutes. I'm leaving. So he said, come over here. We went over to the far corner of the library. He says, we want to make a settlement with you. So what do you mean? He says, we want to make a cash settlement with you. He did mention the sum of money. And I thought to myself, if this was a suicide, if all these facts, why the settlement? Why is this necessary? So I told him, I said, you know the address of my cousin who's in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. He's my lawyer. You want to make any settlements, talk to him. Don't talk to me. So I left. And then when I got to the airport, we had to take cholera shots before we got out of Morocco. That was something that was going on at that time. And about the time I got through taking these cholera shots and I was getting ready to board this flight, this guy, he was a large man, very immaculately dressed in a blue pinstripe suit, carrying a briefcase. He set the briefcase down, he grabbed me, and he spun me around like a top. And he said, we're watching you. And he said, when you get back to the States, he said, I want you to know that. It scared the hell out of me. So I called Jack Galbraith. There was one of these phony paid telephones at the airport, and they took a slug about the size of a silver dollar. It was a brass token, and the thing worked, luckily, and I got a hold of him and told him what happened. He said they were trying to scare you. I said they did. So I jumped on the flight and left. Now, you mentioned another point to it. What was that?
And then went on to the fact that the vice consul from Casablanca had enough, well, was threatened. Okay. The Apollo's port captain threatened in the presence of the American vice consul from Casablanca that he had enough material, including illicit photographs of Miss Meister, to swear Meister, or smear Meister.
Yes, in one case I received an anonymous letter from somebody named, it was signed Jack Donahue, General Delivery, San Francisco, California, stating that Jerry Donahue says, I have been contacted by certain persons about the purchase of certain films of interest to you. I was offered $1,000. Perhaps you might like to purchase these at a slightly increased price. If so, please write me in care of General Delivery, San Francisco. Sincerely, Jerry Donahue. I turned these over to the United States Postal Inspector, and they set up an elaborate trap at the post office in San Francisco. And they done surveillance on this for like a month. Nobody ever picked up the bait.
Was this before your daughter's death or after?
After.
Well,
then the other thing was, in the Jack Galbraith's case, he was the vice consul. He was called by the Church of Scientology, the ship Apollo, to come down to Safi. They wanted to talk to him after I left. See, my sudden departure was, I was scheduled in their schedule to leave Sunday, but I thought I better get out of there fast. And I got out of there, and I was on that Lufthansa flight, and I was in Frankfurt, Germany, relaxing. Before they were aware that I was gone, I guess. But this letter, Jack went down there anyway. And when he went down there, they accused him of putting Coca-Cola in their engines to ruin them. And said that we can make things plenty hot for a nosy vice consul coming around here. And this is a letter that I got from his wife, and in part says, Jack is still working in fulfilling your request. I asked him to get some information, but has had little success so far. The crew of the famous ship tried to make things very difficult for Jack with various government authorities, including the Senate and the White House. However, apparently there was no permanent damage done, except perhaps to the ship itself, which had to go to such drastic lengths to cover up something. But be careful.
Any other questions, Mr. Gordon?
I think someone mentioned whether we should ask him about R-245. Was he aware of that?
Yeah,
Is that after your daughter died that you became aware of that, or?
Oh, I didn't know anything about this
Okay.
this cult until after that, after my daughter's death.
So everything that you now know about Scientology, you've learned since she has died, and
Sure.
you've been investigating. Okay.
Sure. And of course, more things come out, and I think this is a very beneficial thing that you people are doing here. I have the feeling, in my own mind, that you're going to save some lives.
Hope so.
All along, we've thought that people have a right to know, and that's why we're holding these hearings. Mr.
Well, that's the reason I dropped my business and came here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Mr. Meister, thank you. And I will
welcome.
search for the truth. I don't care to question.
Well, any questions, I'm glad to answer.
Mr. Meister, I had you had indicated that you've been having, or that you had a lot of trouble with the Church of Scientology. Those letters that you read, such as that anonymous letter to the health officials and so forth, have other things continued to happen to you?
My telephone's been tapped.
How do you know?
It was tapped at the telephone company office.
It was found then?
Yes.
To be tapped?
Yes.
At the telephone company?
Oh, yeah, they do that. They've infiltrated government offices. They went into Washington, D.C. They went into FBI offices.
Oh, I'm aware of that.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean,
infiltrating the telephone company's child's play compared to that.
I'm sorry I made an outburst, but I wasn't going to ask you a question.
Yeah, they can do
Clear
that.
in my mind, the telephone company in Greeley, in that office, your telephone was
Yes,
tapped.
your telephone can be tapped right
I
here in
believe mine
Clearwater.
tapped.
Through
I
the
have-
telephone office.
I have anti-devices on mine already, plus a phone mate.
Do you have, are there other types of examples, Mr. Meister? I mean, have they continued to send you such letters?
Well, I've received death threats on telephone.
You have?
Sure. Tell me that they were going to blast me like they blasted my daughter. Well, they didn't identify themselves, but I've been told that you're going to get the same thing your daughter got.
Has this type of harassment continued recently?
No. It continued up until the time the FBI made that raid. And after the time the FBI made that raid, and of course they were exposed to the publicity nationally that they were, that's been the end of that.
Thank you.
Just one. Mr. Meister, did you know at that time that the Apollo, the ship, was a flag base? The quote-unquote flag for
Not
Scientology?
before I went there, no. I didn't even know of its existence.
The reason we question you as the mayor put it so well previously is that now we have the flag here, and we are trying to discover whether or not the same policies that have existed throughout
I don't know.
are still here in Clearwater.
I don't know, but I know from the way this thing was put together, it was quite ingenious. This ship was purchased in England. It was a war surplus item, and they put it to sea, but it was under Panamanian registry. It was making in foreign ports. Hubbard was the commodore on board, and of course legally, and under admiralty law, on the high seas and in foreign ports, he's the law.
Did you verify by dental records or whatever that the body that...
Yes, I did. It was an unpleasant experience. We opened this box, and myself and our family dentist confirmed that it was in fact Susan's body, because at that point in time I wasn't ready to accept anything. And yes, it is. My daughter is buried in that
Really?
grave and in that casket.
Consul in Morocco, or did they try to attain other especially the photo?
I did.
No, everything It seemed to me like the Scientologists were in total control over there.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when you went to, Mr. Hubbard was on the ship, and you went to him as a father, speaking to their father, he wouldn't even talk to you?
Refused to see me.
Even after the tragedy and why you came that great distance, and any reason why he wouldn't see you?
He didn't give a reason. We sent one of his people to ask him because we knew he was aboard the ship. But the reply came back, no.
I have no further questions. I thank you, sir.
Mayor, I think that's all that I would put in today. I would just note for the record that there have been 2 documented suicides pertaining to the church to date in Church of Scientology, and if need be, we could put in the records pertaining to their deaths.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, we have probably one more day unless we extend these hearings, and we have about how many more witnesses do you have, or how much more time will you need?
Can't do it on Sunday. That's Mother's Day.
I have 7 more. What I'm going to attempt to do tonight is try to restrict their testimony to specific areas. There'll be a lot left out, but in view of the time constraints that we're suffering from, and a lot of the documents that we're going to go into evidence, I will just mark for the record and leave for your perusal. Some documents pertaining to the use of auditing information on a persistent basis by the Church of Scientology. Tomorrow I will put on the overhead projector. I would hope that I could get most of the testimony of those 7 witnesses in tomorrow.
Because we've been averaging about 2.5 witnesses a day, and so...
Mayor and Commissioners, it might be that, depending on how it goes, obviously you want to terminate as quick as you could, but you might consider going a little longer tomorrow night
Or shortening the lunch hour.
if the need.
Yeah.
Well, or shortening the lunch
We're already down to
Why not
now.
all the lunch and let's take a short lunch hour?
How about the pleasure of the commission? Is there a person, Mr. Flynn, here that would you like to hear another witness? It's about 5:30. We don't have a city commission meeting. We could get one more witness in. I think would come closer to the deadline.
No, I would rather meet...
Vision cable's running out of time?
I would rather have running out of tape.
time.
Vision is running out of tape. I would rather meet, take a
extra
shorter
tomorrow.
lunch hour and possibly work longer tomorrow night if we have to.
Or extended.
Do you have any... Well, that's another option. We can't extend. Do you have any indication, Mr. Flynn, that we will have a meeting Monday with the Scientologists?
I have no idea. I haven't heard anything from them. As I said in my opening, I would hope that they would respond, and I hope that this commission would have the opportunity to question them.
But at this point, your office or mine has no indication that the Scientologists will respond by Monday.
I'd just like to throw this out. There is one person that I've seen his name throughout these testimonies. Does anyone know the witnesses or counsel, perhaps, if Mr. Artie Marin is still a member of the organization?
Or still locally based?
I would, that is one person. I see his name continually through the testimony, and I think that would be one person that I feel the Church of Scientology would want to have come before us, and I would gladly like to see Mr. Marin testify here.
Since Mr. Marin was in the Guardian's Office Public Relations Division at a very high level, I think that would be a very appropriate suggestion.
If you're out there, we'd like to talk to you Monday. Meeting is adjourned.